I appreciate you taking time with us. That was a very impassioned. What I did jump in and hear from you, that was great. I guess I would sort of pick it up and say, I don't know if you had already discussed this, and I apologize if you have, but not to speak for everyone, but do you think that based on what's happened this year, do you think that without expanding the college football playoff, that there's ever going to be and this year it's Cincinnati, but do you think a non-Power 5 team has a chance to make a 4-team playoff?
Well, it's going to be very tough unless there is expansion down the road, Jed, and there probably will be in all likelihood. I think this is one of the better opportunities we've had, although I think it's sort of been in part, it almost looks like it's been taken away, and I'm not sure, and I don't want to say that because I still think Cincinnati should have a legitimate shot if they win, if they beat Tulsa. And the problem has been they do view G5 differently than P5. They don't apply the same tests. As you know, they apply the eye test, but what about the eye test for Cincinnati? How do you apply the eye test and not realize that this is a superior team, that this is a unique, the last two Cincinnati teams have been very good. They've won 11 games. They had great players who are now in the NFL. They've won games on the road. They beat UCLA on the road. They've won P5 games. They beat Virginia Tech in a bowl game. They destroyed BC last year in a bowl game. They played 2 tough games against a really good Memphis team last year. But this is an even better Cincinnati team. And coaches in our league have said that. The defense is even better. It's even faster. It's even deeper. They've got a great offense. You've got some great players on that team and a lot of balance. You've got a now experienced third-year quarterback in Desmond Ridder. You've got it all. You've got great defensive backs in James Wiggins, Ahmad Gardner. I hope I pronounce it right. Arquan Bush. You've got Kobe Bryant. You look at the team and you say, okay, this team can play with anyone. Don't put a label on them. Don't put the G5 label. But to answer your question, I think it's getting increasingly frustrated that they don't seem to get the opportunity and when they should. And I think UCF, it's been a process, Jed. UCF got to number 12, I guess, in 2017, and they were a really good team. And the committee didn't give them enough respect, and I think they knew it afterward. And then the following year, yes, they got up to 8, but they still weren't really in the thick of it. An undefeated team in our league that's won 25 straight games should maybe be number 4 or number 3, and then obviously Mackenzie Milton got hurt. And had he not got hurt, I think we could have made a big push at the end. I'm not sure it would have worked. And they probably would have won the game, the Fiesta Bowl, very easily if Mackenzie Milton had stayed healthy. And then you look at Houston in 2015, that team could beat anybody in the P5. They beat a Florida State team in the top 10 that had given Clemson a good game on the road, and they beat them by 2 touchdowns. So, we've had good teams. We've had teams that were deserving. The other thing too is they always use the strength of schedule, and our strength of schedule is getting better and better with this league. Houston in 2016, you could argue because they beat a top 5 team and maybe a top 3 team in Oklahoma and Louisville, had they gone undefeated, could they have made a claim? I don't know what would have happened. It's hard to say. But if it does expand to 8 down the road, and I'm not out here campaigning, I'd like to see it happen, but I don't want to get into it because right now it's not on the front burner. But if it does expand to 8, I want this league to have an automatic bid. I don't want to have to compete with 4 conferences that I don't think are as deep and strong as ours. And year after year, we have to worry about that. I think there's some good teams in those conferences, but our league has really gotten to be to P5 level. And I look around the P5 this year, and do you see a conference that stands out this year, other than maybe a team or 2 here and there at the top? No, you don't. You really don't. And, UCF got to play Georgia Tech and won 49 to whatever, right? We didn't have a chance to play the P5 like we normally do this year. But last year, SMU beat TCU. A few years ago, Houston beat Oklahoma. We're the only conference that stopped Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson. Neither of them beat us, and neither of them 10 sacks on Lamar Jackson, won the Heisman. Baker Mayfield, lost 33 to whatever. It could have been 40 to 17 if they hadn't had a fumble at the end. Houston, kind of a silly play at the end. But, we'll see. That's my take on it. I think it's going to be very tough based on what I'm seeing, but But, I have to keep campaigning. And I think you and the media, if you agree with me and you feel I'm making good points, then I think you can help. I think you can, you can put pressure on this committee to do the right thing. And, the interesting thing is, last year, Cincinnati and Memphis, Jed, were very good teams. But I didn't, they weren't going to be top four teams. And I didn't say it. I didn't say that. I wouldn't, Chuck can tell you, I wasn't campaigning for a top four for those teams, but they were very good teams. This year, you've got a legitimate elite team with an experienced, dynamic, defense, playmakers on both sides of the ball, everything you'd want in a team that has shut down teams that were averaging 40 points a game. Just a really outstanding team. And you did with UCF in 17 and 18. You did with Houston in 50. It may not happen every year, but it's happened most years. Our top teams can play with anyone. We beat Auburn in the bowl game. Auburn beat Alabama that year. Do I think UCF could have beaten Alabama in a bowl game? Absolutely do. Absolutely do. Alabama struggled with a Georgia team that, neither of those teams had quarterbacks the quality of Mackenzie Milton at that time. So we'll see. We're just going to have to keep fighting.
I'm interested also to hear, I heard a little bit with Jeremy, the conversation about Ohio State, which is also, very relevant to us here in Cincinnati. But, at the time that the playoff rankings came out last night, Ohio State did not have another game on their schedule. And, they aren't going to play Michigan. We knew that. And it sounds like there may get some things may get switched around and they may potentially have a game this weekend, but they also may be able to compete for the Big Ten championship. But do you think it's a little problematic that the playoff committee said, okay, even though you've played 5 games, we're not interested necessarily in you even playing anymore. You're kind of good at 5-0.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know what they said. I don't know what message they were sending, but I have an issue. I don't care who it is, whether it's that team or another team. I have an issue with not playing very many games and also not starting until literally half the season was gone. To me, you just shouldn't get the benefit of the doubt. And that's why Cincinnati, I think, should be ranked higher, because I think that you haven't had to put up with all the wear and tear of an entire season. You haven't had to put up with all the COVID testing week after week, all the stress on the players. You haven't put up with the injury risk. You haven't put up with the risk of losing. Also, that team you mentioned hasn't really played a tough schedule. Again, you look at the record of these teams and you look at, and I don't want to get into the Big Ten's politics about what they're going to do next week or the week after. I don't care about that. That's their business. But I think the committee has to look at number of games. I heard something, on the show last night, there's a selection show. Well, they played enough games to show who they are. Well, what's that mean? I could play 2 games and show who I am if I have a couple of good games. Houston beat Oklahoma, decisively in that opening game in 2016. They showed who they are, but they wouldn't put them in the playoff on the basis of 1 game. If you haven't played a representative schedule and you haven't played a number of games and you didn't even start till half the season, I think that should be a real issue. It seems to have been an issue for the Pac-12 teams, and but not necessarily for other conferences. But again, I think teams that started and decided to play and felt they could do it safely and did do it safely. We were extra cautious in the way we played or didn't play our games. Should get the benefit of the doubt. That's my feeling. And I don't really care about how it all works out down the road. But the committee, in the past, let's face it, has sent conflicting signals. But, I pointed to the eye test. Well, how do you look at Cincinnati and they don't pass the eye test? I look around college football and I see these other teams that were flavor of the week. And I say, wait a minute, you can see them on film. I've watched football for decades and I think I know football. And I can see the Cincinnati speed. I can see the sure tackling they do. I can see, the way their secondary plays. And I look at these other teams and I say, well, why would you think that team's better than Cincinnati? Give them a shot. Give them a shot. See if they can hold Alabama to fewer than 52 points. I think they might have a shot to do it. And if they can't, they can't. But, the other team, what's the point of a rematch there? The same thing's going to happen. Look what's happened in the past CFPs with some of these teams. It's been 30, 40, 50 points in the first half. And then next thing you know, there's no game. Give Cincinnati with that elite defense, which should be valued in college football more than it probably is, because in this day and age, as you know, Jed, it's pretty hard to have a good defense with these offenses. They're so dynamic and the rules are skewed so much for the offense. It's pretty tough to play defense like they do. That's a credit to Luke, of course, and a credit to Marcus Freeman as well.
You know, that is interesting because a lot of people seem to think, well, we don't want to see Cincinnati play Alabama because that's going to be a blowout. But without sort of recalling that Notre Dame has been blown out in the college football playoff. Ohio State has been blown out. Oklahoma has been blown out. There seems to be a blowout once every year or once every couple of years at the very least. Why is it that fear, you think, for some people means that Cincinnati's on the outside looking in, but not other teams?
Yeah, well, I don't think it should be a fear. And you're right, it's happened to a number of teams. And it's happened to some of those teams twice. But in Cincinnati's case, why would you think that? I mean, with that defense, and by the way, with our track record, you know, they say, well, we don't look at the past. Well, of course they do. Otherwise, the P5 wouldn't always get the benefit of the doubt. And that's what really irritates me, because I don't care what you want to call it. I'm not going to use some terms I probably could use about how you might. But the point is, we've played those games and we've won those games. You know, UCF was going to get blown out by Auburn. Oh, Auburn, they beat Alabama. They're number 7 in the country. And UCF dominated most of the game and ended up winning. And, you know, with a little luck, could have won by 2 touchdowns. You know, Houston, they can't play Oklahoma in 2016. And then they end up, if they hadn't fumbled at the goal line at the end, they would have won 40-17. You know, if you look at, then Louisville is going to blow Houston out probably. And, in 2016, 31-0 at the half, Houston, right? You know, same thing with Florida State, Houston in the Peach Bowl, 2015. 21-3 at the half, Houston, right? Turns out all those great NFL players, Landon Roberts, you know, Cam Malveaux, Bowser, you know, William Jackson, you know, all these great players, Greg Ward, give them credit. You know, they held Dalvin Cook to 30 yards, and he's a star in the NFL. You know, who says we can't play with these teams? And when you look at a team like Cincinnati with that defense, give them a shot. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but it hadn't worked for these other teams either. Why would you do a rematch when you already know what happened? Give them a shot. And that's what really bothers me, because this is a team that deserves a shot. You know, they keep talking about these other teams, and I see Cincinnati and I say, well, okay, there's some teams in those 4 where, you know, there's one particular team that has a quarterback who scrambles. He seems pretty effective. He's going to scramble the same way against the Cincinnati defense that is really fast and closes quickly and is sure tacklers. I'm very impressed when I watch that team, how well they tackle, how fundamentally sound they are. And sure, it's impossible not to give up some yardage and some scores in college football. Although they held Army to no TDs. Army's a good team. They're a hard team to play. You know, Army can wear you out, and they're a good team. And they held them to no touchdowns offensively. And they've held explosive teams like Memphis, Houston, UCF, you know, in check. You know, UCF's average is ridiculous, 600 yards a game almost. And, you know, you saw what they did on the road in a tough environment. So, again, I just like to see the committee use the same standards to compare our teams. You know, I made a point last year, Jed, that there was a double standard at work. Appears it's still there. But last year, you know, a 2-3 loss, you know, P5 team can jump over teams that are undefeated that are in the G5 or whatever, like a Coastal Carolina, which should be ranked higher. Or why isn't Louisiana ranked higher than Iowa State? They beat them by 17 points up there at their place, and they're 9-1 or whatever they are. How come they're not ranked higher? And then how come Cincinnati isn't ranked higher than both of them? When you take an undefeated team in the top 10 and you have somebody with 2 losses jump them, how can you defend that? You know, especially since the 2 wins they recently had, which were used as the basis for that, are not impressive wins against a 3-loss team and a 4-loss team, both of which are not, you could hardly argue, or they're not. This is not like they just beat Alabama and Clemson. No, we can forget about the 2 earlier losses, including the 17-point loss to a G5 team at home. You know, let's be reasonable here. That's my point.